Hi there. How are you doing?
I am good. How are you?
Great, great. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're looking forward to learning more about the masked finfoot and the work you've been doing on that species. Um, Sayam Chowdhury is a conservation biologist with a focus on the ecology and conservation of threatened species in Asia. He is just weeks away from defending his PhD, so I really appreciate the time that you're taking to sit with us today. Um, so this is probably a very high pressure period for you. The audience would love to know more about you. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a moment to talk about what you'd love to do, what your background is, and about your expertise in this area.
Yeah. First of all, the reason I picked this date is I thought, before my submission, I should be done by now
Yeah.
and have some time to work on the webinar. And guess what? I was wrong.
No,
But I
I
still have a
totally
lot
get
to do, but it's possible.
it. Took me 4 years to get my master's, so it happens.
Yeah, so I'm from Bangladesh and I became interested on birds ever since I was a kid. And I was fascinated by bird diversity, their color. And then I studied environmental science for my undergrad. And then I did my undergrad thesis on critically endangered spoonbill sandpiper. And that actually got me into conservation science and research. And later on, I did got involved with many other projects, and the masked finfoot is one of those. So back in 2011, right after I completed my undergrad, I wanted to work on a few other species that are little known,
Mhm.
that needed some work and some push to do conservation work and of having an impact on in saving them from extinction. So then I took on this masked finfoot, which is very close to me as well. And I then did my master's in Cambridge as well on conservation leadership back in 2015. And I went back and then wanted to do a PhD and to study shorebirds. I look at tidal flats and shorebirds in Bangladesh and other parts of Asia for my PhD. But we're
Mhm.
not going to talk about shorebirds today. I'm going to focus on the masked finfoot.
Mhm.
So, uh,
Mhm. Great, great. Well, thanks for telling us some of your background. We're ready to get started if you are. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
thank you. I'll try and change the slide. Okay, it worked. So before I began, I thought it'd be good to give you a background of what I'm going to talk about. So basically, I will tell you what is a masked finfoot and what we know about them and how they're doing globally in terms of their status and why they occur and how what conservation work we should do and we could do and what we are doing at the moment, and can we still save them, or is it too late? So I'm gonna touch each of these topics and try and explain as much as possible. But then again, we will have some question and answer sessions, so I can answer your questions if you have any. So there are three species of finfoots in the world, and interestingly, it's one in Asia, one in Africa, and one in South America. And the masked finfoot is the only migratory finfoot. The two other species are not migrants, and they're also not threatened. So let's keep that in mind, because migrants are facing problems all over the world, and this is probably another victim of that as well. And the global status of masked finfoot is now critically endangered. And it became only critically endangered in 2022. Before that, it was just endangered, and the global population estimate was very wide. Um, and another interesting fact about finfoot is that the local people in Bangladesh call the bird hashpaki, which means duck bird, because they look a bit like duck, but they're far from ducks, actually. They're quite closely related to rails and limpkins, and within that same order. But there are some similarities between coots and moorhens, but what makes finfoot more unique is their adaptation for swimming and also climbing. So I'm going to give you some examples. So you can see that the legs are quite distinct, quite different, and they have these webs that allow them to both swim and also climb. And because this finfoot was swimming, and there was an approaching crocodile, and it swam away. Thankfully, I was very nervous when I was seeing it. It's like, don't kill my finfoot, where we have only few left in the world. But it survived because it could swim really well, and also it could climb. And I'm gonna play a little clip before you jump in. So a friend of mine was taking a picture as well. She was doing this. This clip was recorded back in 2011 when we were doing the breeding surveys. So let me take you back to Bangladesh and tell you a bit more about how I got started on finfoot. I think I was telling a little bit about it at the beginning. But back in 2011, we done a big survey in the eastern part of the Sundarbans. And I will play a video shortly in the next slide that will give you a snapshot of what we have done. And I think that will help you to understand the entire story, how it began and why we are with the finfoot conservation and research. I apologize because the video clip is very low resolution because back in 2011 we didn't really have smartphones or good cameras to record it, but let's go for it. So before we did the surveys, we were very lucky to have this study that was done. It was a very short study, but that was done in 2004, and that really worked, helped us to design our work. And we did this big scale survey in the Sundarbans in Bangladesh, which is the largest mangrove forest in the world. And the boat you just saw was our research station for a couple of months. And initially it was quite hard to really understand how to look for the finfoot nest. But then once we got the hang of it, then we started finding nests, and they usually build a nest just above high tide water level, watermark, maybe 1 or 2 meter high. And once you know where to look for them, you could find them. And the breeding season in Bangladesh is during monsoon, which is between, say, June and July, well, June and September, maybe broadly, but peaks in July. And it's really, really hot. The temperature is sometimes between 35 and 40 degrees Celsius. And humidity could be 95%. So it was difficult, but we were very happy every day whenever we found a nest. And we were also monitoring the nest using camera traps. And as you can see in this clip, this is a female incubating. And we found that the female is the one that incubates mostly. The male comes sometimes, but it's not that regular. But the female is the one who incubates primarily and then takes care of the chicks as well. And there are some clips here. So this is a male swimming across. I'm gonna try and fast forward this because this clip is a bit long. And this is a female also approaching the nest. And while we were studying the breeding behavior, we also looked at their food. And we figured that although in this clip it was feeding on a shrimp, but we later on we figured that they are primarily dependent on crab. So they forage on these exposed mud inside densely forested creeks and during low tide. So when the water recedes, they come out of the forest where they usually roost, and then they forage, they swim up and down the creek. Sometimes they just use say 1 kilometer stretch of this creek to spend the entire season. And this is the same clip I showed earlier, slightly better resolution. And this was one of the nests we were monitoring using camera traps, and you will see in a second that the bird is going to its nest. And that was the camera trap. And the reason I had kept this video of male and female foraging in the rain is probably because this is probably one of my best moments with the finfoots. It was really beautiful to see this pair vanishing into the creek when it was raining, and it was nice. And then, so while we were looking at the breeding of this particular nest, we were also taking some samples around to see what they feed on. And this was our floating height that we used to monitor the nest, obviously from a safe distance, that we don't disturb the bird. And this nest produced this healthy chick. And ultimately it had two out of three eggs got hatched, and one was not really fertile. We don't really know why they didn't hatch, and this was the proud mother of these two little chicks. And while we were looking for finfoot, we also talked to local fishermen. To our surprise, at least 60% of them have eaten masked finfoot at least once in their lifetime. So that then became a big problem, and the reason that happens is that the fishermen, they set up their nets, we call them longshore nets, along the same creeks where finfoot nest as well. So what they do is they put that nest the nets during low tide, and they come back to collect the fish later on. And when they're doing it, they could actually discover the finfoot nests, because when you approach a nest, the finfoot would always flush on the water, so they could usually see it. And what they do is they come back at night, and then they use a flashlight to temporarily blind the incubating bird and then take the eggs, sometimes the adult. So that became a huge issue, and we tried to work on that as well. So the results of that survey of our 2011 work, and then we found that there has been a shift in their nesting tree preference, because we managed to compare our work with the 2004 study, and not only tree species preference, we could also see there has been a change in their nesting distribution, especially if you look at this figure here. All these triangles are nests that were found in 2004. And we didn't find any nest well, only one nest, despite looking for them intensively in that area. But as we started going north, we started to find the nest, and the stars are the ones that we found. And we don't really know why is that. We suspect that because there are several tropical cyclones that happened post 2004, that might have had an impact in the local systems, and that therefore the finfoot remaining pairs had disappeared from there. Or are they shifting northward, towards less or more saline area? We don't really understand this, but I think that's a critical thing that we need to find an answer. Why the birds are declining from the coastal sites, or if it's not a true decline, we're not finding the nests, we're not finding the adults. That could happen, but we're now working towards finding those answers. So let me zoom out a little bit and tell you a bit more about the masked finfoot range at the moment, or historical range. So it used to occur throughout South and Southeast Asia primarily, and isolatedly Sundarbans of Bangladesh, which is here. And as you can see in the eBird occurrence data map, that there are very few points, and they're not really, you could only see them in certain locations. So back in 2020, me and my colleagues from Southeast Asia, we looked at all recent or historical masked finfoot sightings from several different countries, such as Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Cambodia. And as you can see in the plot, that all those sightings had dropped significantly, except for Cambodia, which we think is because there are more people looking for them, and people know where to look for them, and therefore there are more sightings. And we also found that the reason the finfoot might be migrating is because in Peninsular Malaysia, Thailand, and even in Singapore, most of the records are between December and March, which is the wet season in those countries, and the dry season in the continental Southeast Asia, which is, say, for example, Cambodia. So we think the movement of finfoot across Southeast Asia is possibly linked with water level in seasonal inland forested wetlands. So when the water level drops, it becomes dry, the creeks become unsuitable, then they have to go somewhere. And that's probably part of the reason why the population in Bangladesh and the Sundarbans do not migrate, because there is always water. This is just the tidal changes that happens every day. So when we were doing our assessment of the global masked finfoot status, we first looked at Myanmar because that has always been our understanding, the hotspot of the species. But when we really looked into Myanmar and looked at particularly Hukong Valley, we figured that there has been large-scale forest loss that happened primarily due to gold mining and agricultural expansion. And we suspect there might be even if there are finfoot, it would be a very small number. And then we also came up with this table of all the possible locations within some of these range countries and kind of estimated population for each location. Many of those are actually best guess because we don't have much information, but we deduce that using what is happening to the forests, what we know from other sources. So the green circles in the map, I'm not sure if you can see it, it's very small, present the sites with current breeding records, and the blue circles are the ones that may still hold breeding birds, but we don't know. So it really comes down to these 7 sites, and I say 7, but it actually might be fewer than that, because Bangladesh, we know that is the hotspot of the bird, where the bird breeds. We know that the breed in Cambodia. We do not know what is happening in Myanmar. We do not know what is happening in Laos. So that becomes a problem. So at one point, I wondered, like, we did all this research, and did it actually help with the species conservation at all? Like, or we are just publishing our papers, and then nothing happens. So I tried to look into this more closely. So I made this figure to show you what we have started in 2013, 11, between 11 and 13 in Bangladesh, and we did this global assessment with my colleagues in 2022. Then it became critically endangered in 2022 as well. So that's then that led to several local actions. It's a good and a sad story. Good because the bird became critical. People are now noticing the bird. People are talking about it. They want to do something about it, which is why we are doing this webinar, for example. The sad is that the bird is declining. So it's both ways I see this outcome. So we also had got involved with the East Asia Australasia Flyer Partnership, which is a government partnership of the Asian migratory birds, where governments and NGOs and other interested parties come together and work towards protecting some of these key sites of migratory birds. And we presented a paper in one of these meetings, and seems like the governments are interested to support and create a masked finfoot task force through which we could do more collective and more rigorous work to save the species. So since some local actions are already taking place, I'm hoping for a brighter future for them. So the answer is that I personally think that we still have time to save the masked finfoot. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what local actions have taken place in the last, say, 2 years or 3 years. And I'll start with Bangladesh. So last year, we got some support from Bird Conservation Fund and Oriental Bird Club and a few other local organizations to restart our work in the Sundarbans of Bangladesh. And we've done a bit extensive environmental survey as well as breeding survey for the finfoot. So we identified all the possible creeks using remote sensing, and then tried to survey some of them. It's really huge. The area, as you can see in the map, is probably 3,000 square kilometer. But we are getting there. We are now collecting data on salinity, on prey abundance, and obviously masked finfoot nests. And I hope to share some results on that soon. So WCS, Wildlife Conservation Society Cambodia, has been very engaged in finfoot conservation, and they usually focus in the northern plains where they already had existing projects where they do lots of local community work, and they also do specific masked finfoot focused expeditions to find them in new locations. And they also have this nest guarding system, which basically means that if there is a problem with the nest, as in like depending on the location, if the locals feel that the nest could be threatened by people, then they hire someone from the community to protect the nest, and they get a bonus if the chicks fledge successfully. So WCS Cambodia also did a pilot study on acoustic monitoring of masked finfoot, which is quite surprising, which produced good results, and it could be implemented in other places in Cambodia. And their next plan is to implement and do the same surveys in other places, and do more expeditions. And I have to thank Emmeline for sharing these slides with me for a WCS Cambodia update. So back in Bangladesh, we really want to create a masked finfoot task force, and we are currently working to identify the hotspots, and then we are working with the communities and the government to explain it to them that how important the masked finfoot has become over the years, and we need to protect all the important creeks, both during breeding and non-breeding season, and possibly set up a long-term monitoring scheme. So another thing that I would like to mention here is that there are some things that I personally don't understand, like why, because the Sundarbans of Bangladesh is probably one of the well-protected national parks in the country and could be like in the whole region. Despite that, the birds are still declining. And I mentioned about the fishermen, but what happened recently is that I think during COVID, the government banned fishing, somehow coincided with the masked finfoot breeding season. And last year, when my team did the surveys, they encountered very few fishermen. So that threat got reduced somehow, at least to some extent. But I personally believe that there is something else ecologically happening that we are not understanding. So we'll be focusing on a bit of science on finfoot as well. In other countries, when the political situation in Myanmar improves, we would like to go and do some surveys to see if there are still populations left that are worth protecting. And there are some locations in Laos where we think it might be useful to do some survey work. And I know many of you are birders, and if you want to see the masked finfoot added to your life list, I'm also a very keen birder, so I understand the importance and urge. So we run a few trips to Bangladesh every year in collaboration with some bird tour companies, especially Bird Tour Asia. And part of the profit goes to conservation projects in Bangladesh and other places, including the masked finfoot. And if you wish to donate the finfoot conservation work, you could scan this QR code and go to the Oriental Bird Club website and then do your donation. Please mention the finfoot in your reference so that the club knows that the fund is specifically for this bird. Yes, thank you very much.